Have you ever wondered why some people seem incapable of apologizing, no matter the situation? Today, we're delving into the psychology of defensiveness and exploring the reasons why some individuals consistently resist saying, "I'm sorry." We'll examine the mental barriers and emotional mechanisms that drive this behavior, from deeply ingrained pride to fears of vulnerability. Understanding these psychological patterns can provide insights into not just others' actions, but our own defensive responses as well. Get ready for a thought-provoking journey into the minds of those who find apologies impossible. 1. Pride and ego. These are two hefty barriers that can make apologies seem like a mountain too high to climb. When pride swells, admitting a mistake feels like a direct threat to one's self-image. It's about defending a constructed identity rather than embracing the humility required to say, "I was wrong." This defense mechanism kicks into overdrive, especially when a person feels their status is being challenged or scrutinized. Consider a workplace scenario where a manager refuses to apologize for a strategic blunder. Despite the team facing setbacks due to their decision, the manager's high self-regard clouds their judgment, blocking the path to acknowledging their mistake. The consequence? A team that feels undervalued, and a leader who remains isolated by their own ego. In personal relationships, ego plays out similarly. A person might avoid apologizing after a heated argument because they perceive admitting fault as a sign of weakness. This often leads to unresolved conflicts and strained relationships, where one's need to appear strong overrides the health of the relationship. Ego doesn't just put up walls around apologies, it often warps the perception of reality, leading individuals to believe they are less at fault than they might be. This self-serving bias reinforces the cycle of not apologizing, making interpersonal connections more challenging and less authentic. Understanding the dynamics of pride and ego can help us see why some people find it so hard to step back, reflect, and make amends. It's a complex interplay of self-perception, fear, and the innate desire to protect one's self-esteem. 2. Fear of vulnerability. Admitting wrongdoing is essentially opening up one's armor and exposing the soft underbelly of vulnerability, a prospect that many find not just uncomfortable but completely terrifying. This fear stems from the risk of judgment, rejection, or even the loss of respect from others, factors that can feel like threats to one's social survival. Brené Brown, a leading researcher on vulnerability, argues that this discomfort with being vulnerable hampers our ability to connect genuinely with others. When someone avoids admitting faults, they are essentially choosing self-protection over connection, blocking the building blocks of trust and understanding in relationships. Brown's research shows that while vulnerability might feel risky, it is crucial for building deeper connections and achieving personal growth. In the real world, this plays out in numerous settings. In personal relationships, for instance, a partner might avoid admitting they forgot an important date, fearing the disappointment or anger it might provoke. Instead of opening up to potential conflict, which could actually lead to resolution and growth, they choose silence, allowing the issue to fester. Similarly, in professional environments, an employee might hide a mistake for fear that admitting it could lead to repercussions or taint their reputation. This fear holds them back from seeking help or learning from the error, stunting both personal and organizational development. 3. Lack of empathy. Empathy is the glue that binds our social world together, allowing us to understand and feel the emotions of others. A shortfall in this critical ability means a person might struggle to grasp how their actions affect those around them. This empathy deficit can significantly reduce the likelihood of acknowledging harm and offering apologies, simply because the individual may not fully realize there's something to apologize for in the first place. Neuroscience offers insights into how empathy develops in the brain. Studies have identified specific regions such as the anterior insula and the medial prefrontal cortex that are pivotal in processing empathy. These areas help us to mirror the emotions of others and to generate appropriate responses. When there's underactivity in these regions, as seen in conditions such as psychopathy or severe narcissistic personality disorder, an individual's capacity for empathy can be notably diminished. In everyday life, this lack of empathy can manifest in various ways. For example, a manager might dismiss the concerns of overworked employees, viewing them merely as complainers rather than understanding the stress they are under. Without recognizing the genuine distress of their team, the manager sees no need for reconciliation or change. In personal settings, someone might not understand why their offhand remark at a dinner party was hurtful. Their brain simply doesn't process the emotional cues that others naturally pick up on, leaving friends feeling hurt and the individual confused as to why. 4. Sociocultural influences. Cultural backgrounds and societal norms play a substantial role in shaping how and when people apologize, reflecting diverse understandings and practices around the concept of forgiveness and reconciliation. These differences can deeply influence one's likelihood of apologizing, showcasing the breadth of human social behavior across cultures. In Japan, for instance, apologies are deeply ingrained in social etiquette, often used not just to express remorse, but to maintain harmony and show respect. A Japanese business person might apologize even when they have not directly caused a problem, simply to express empathy and solidarity. This is in stark contrast to more individualistic cultures like the United States, where apologies might be given only when one acknowledges personal fault, emphasizing the value placed on individual accountability over communal harmony. Similarly, in Middle Eastern cultures, preserving honor and dignity is highly significant. An apology might sometimes be seen as an admission of weakness or a loss of face, which can be particularly significant in hierarchical relationships. This perception can hinder the frequency and nature of apologies, with a preference for resolving disputes in more indirect ways. These cultural nuances highlight that the act of apologizing is not merely a personal choice, but is also heavily influenced by the societal framework within which one operates. Understanding these differences is crucial for navigating international relationships and multicultural environments, where the interpretation of an apology can vary dramatically, affecting both personal interactions and professional engagements. 5. Past traumas and defense mechanisms. Past traumas can profoundly affect how individuals interact with the world around them, particularly in how they handle conflicts and potential reconciliations. For many, these traumas lead to the development of defense mechanisms that serve as psychological armor, protecting them from perceived threats, but also hindering their ability to apologize. Sigmund Freud initially conceptualized defense mechanisms as unconscious processes used to avoid anxiety or feelings of inadequacy stemming from internal conflicts. For example, someone who has committed a betrayal may develop defense mechanisms, such as denial, refusing to acknowledge their own hurtful actions as a way to avoid further emotional pain. Contemporary psychologists expand on this idea, explaining that such mechanisms can make apologizing seem like a threat to one's psychological safety. A person might view an apology as an opening of wounds they've struggled long and hard to close. Thus, rather than allowing themselves to be vulnerable, they choose defensiveness, or outright denial of any wrongdoing. This response is particularly evident in relationships where past traumas involve other forms of emotional harm. Here, the act of apologizing can feel like relinquishing a protective barrier, potentially leading to more psychological damage. By understanding these mechanisms, we can better approach situations where apologies are absent, recognizing that the lack of an apology often isn't about the incident itself, but about protecting oneself from deeper, more painful layers of past emotional injuries. This understanding helps in fostering compassion and patience in navigating complex feelings. 6. Power dynamics. These play a crucial role in determining whether someone apologizes, as these dynamics often dictate who feels entitled or obligated to concede fault. In both professional and personal settings, power imbalances can complicate the issuance of apologies, creating environments where apologies are strategically withheld or demanded. In the workplace, consider a scenario where a senior executive makes a costly error. The hierarchical structure might protect them from admitting this mistake due to fear of losing authority or respect. Subordinates observing this may learn that admitting fault is not acceptable behavior in this organizational culture, especially at higher levels of power. Conversely, in personal relationships, power dynamics can manifest in who consistently takes responsibility for issues. For example, in a relationship where one partner holds more emotional control or authority, the other might frequently find themselves apologizing, regardless of fault. This imbalance can lead to a toxic cycle where one person's feelings and viewpoints are continually minimized or dismissed. These dynamics highlight a broader societal pattern where power often shields individuals from accountability. The person in a position of lesser power might feel compelled to apologize as a means to restore harmony or avoid conflict, regardless of the actual circumstances. Recognizing how power influences apologies can help us understand the complexities behind interactions in different spheres of life. Addressing these imbalances involves fostering environments, both professionally and personally, where accountability is encouraged and respected across all levels of power. Bonus tip: handling non-apologists. Dealing with someone who rarely apologizes can be frustrating and draining. However, understanding how to manage these interactions can make a significant difference in maintaining your own emotional well-being. Here's a practical strategy. Try setting boundaries and communicating the impact of their actions without the expectation of an apology. So firstly, it's essential to set clear boundaries. Define what behaviors you find acceptable and what you don't. When someone crosses these lines, calmly and clearly express that their actions are not okay with you. This approach helps establish respect and accountability, making it clear where you stand. Second, communicate openly about how their actions affect you. Rather than waiting for an apology that may never come, focus on expressing your feelings clearly and directly. For example, you might say, "When you did that, it made me feel this." This method shifts the conversation from blame to understanding, encouraging the other person to see the consequences of their actions without making them feel defensive. Remember, the goal here isn't necessarily to change the other person. They may not start apologizing, but to protect your emotional health and clarity in the relationship. By implementing these strategies, you create an environment where mutual respect can grow, even without frequent apologies. This approach not only preserves your self-respect, but also keeps the lines of communication open, potentially paving the way for better interactions in the future. So, we've covered the reasons why some people avoid apologizing. What's next? Maybe you want to find out about how to recognize and deal with emotional manipulation. Or perhaps you would like to learn strategies for dealing with difficult family members. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more psychological insights.